And even though the caption on this post was the P320, it ends today. It didn't actually end that day. They went on to do another post. Hey everyone, I'm Brett, and welcome to Nightwood Guns. I've had enough people DM me on Instagram and comment on other videos about the whole current Sig P320 debacle that I figured I would just put my opinion out there into the ether so that I can just point people to this video when they ask me. Now, I don't claim to be any kind of expert here. I'm a lifelong consumer of firearms, started shooting a lot of guns starting at the age of 5 years old. So outside of being a firearm instructor for over a decade, I am just a knowledgeable consumer, and that's where I come from with my firearm reviews. I've spent a lot of time pulling triggers and a lot of energy getting as good as I can with pistols. Now, I'm not a Sig hater at all. You can check my Sig P320 Spectre comp video to know that I'm not a hater. I really enjoyed that pistol. But in today's video, I'm going to explain why I don't really run Sig striker-fired pistols anymore and why I just typically don't recommend them. Hammer-fired stuff is good to go. The 226s, 229s, 220s, those are all still well-made, reliable, no major issues on those. But from the inception of the P320 and the P365, these Sig pistols have been plagued by issues. So of course everybody knows that the P320 was not drop safe, and it was super sketchy that Sig ever dropped that pistol knowing that. There's no way they didn't know. So essentially what was happening there is the trigger shoe was so heavy on the P320 that when you dropped it like this, the weight of the trigger shoe would press the trigger and boom, it would go off. Now there were also cases of people striking the back of those early P320s with a hammer, causing the same issue to happen. Now, I already had my doubts about the P320 because they essentially took their failed P250 that was a hammer-fired double-action pistol and just crammed a striker system into that gun instead of designing a striker gun from the ground up. But when it was shown that they weren't drop safe, and Sig, there's no way they didn't know that. It's super sketch that they ever released it that way. They didn't recall it. They did a voluntary upgrade program and said that it was fine. But if you wanted to, you could send it in and they would upgrade it with a new trigger that was lighter weight that would not depress when dropped. Now, like I said, I'm a consumer. I'm not an industry guy. That is my perspective here. And that's really crappy. 100% should have been a recall. That is unsafe. But whatever, Sig fixed it on all future P320s moving forward. No longer an issue. And before people call me a hypocrite because I am a huge 2011 and 1911 guy, and people say that the Series 70 2011s and 1911s are not drop safe, so why am I okay with it over here, but I'm not okay with it with the P320? Well, the P320 would discharge if you dropped it on the back of the gun, and it would cause the trigger to depress, and boom, it would go off in any of these directions. That means the bullet is flying into the great beyond to go into the head of some innocent person a mile away. But Series 70 1911s will only go off if you drop them from shoulder height and if they land muzzle down, because essentially the inertia is carrying the firing pin forward, causing it to strike the primer, because there is no firing pin block in a Series 70. Now what that means is the gun is discharging in a direction of very little consequence. It's going into the ground. I don't drop guns, but if some idiot near me drops their 2011, it's going off into the ground, might get nicked by some concrete or spalling, but there's not a live round flying into God knows where. Now, as far as the current issues with the P320, I'm going to direct everybody over to Protraban's video. He did all of the heavy lifting, data collecting, and hard work to create the single best video on this topic. I will link it in the description down below. But here's where I'm at. I currently do not recommend the P320 just based on consumer common sense. Now, there is plenty of bickering on both sides. One side saying it's only idiots negligently discharging their P320s. That's what's leading to all of the unintentional discharges. And then you have the other people saying, no, the gun is getting bumped in the holster, or it is holstered and it just goes off. And there's videos of that happening. Now, what I personally think is I think both are going on at the same time. However, there doesn't seem to be much real world evidence of anything mechanically wrong inside these P320s that are going off. Now, very well, what could be happening is that these P320s are in fact going off, but what does someone do? They send it into Sig for repair, right? And then Sig has it. And then what are they going to, they're going to admit that all of these guns are faulty or can be faulty? No. But it could also be that there is no issue, it's just user error. That's what Sig claims in a very cringe way. So here's Sig's first post about the P320. The too long didn't read on this is that if you in any way question the Sig P320, you align with anti-gun groups and members of the mainstream media, that the P320 consistently delivers a proven record of performance and reliability through state-of-the-art engineering and documented quality control at every stage of its production, even though we have seen evidence to the contrary with the original drop safety concerns. So I'm not sure if this really did undergo the most rigorous testing and evaluations of any firearm by military and law enforcement agencies around the world. You'd think they probably would have caught that. And as if implying that you align with anti-gun groups if you have questions about the P320 wasn't enough, they just go ahead and call you the anti-gun mob if you in any way publicly question the P320. And even though the caption on this post was the P320, it ends today. It didn't actually end that day. They went on to do another post. This post goes on to showcase a case that was dismissed because the police officer that claimed his P320 went off admitted in court documents that it wasn't actually capable of doing that, so it was dismissed. But in this post, they conveniently ignore the cases that they settled and lost, including, just after a quick Google search, jury awards $11 million to man who says Sig Sauer P320 fired unintentionally. And again, simple Google search, here's another one: Sig loses P320 lawsuit, $2.3 million awarded in damages in Georgia. This is just funny because what business does Sig have bringing up a lawsuit when there are other bigger lawsuits that they lost? If this is the straw that they have to grasp for to prove their point, it seems pretty desperate to me. Whatever crisis management firm Sig hired to manage the whole P320 situation recently, they need a refund, because clearly whoever is writing that stuff doesn't realize that gun owners are just a bunch of stinkers and they are only making things worse. But here's my deal from a common sense perspective. I view this as, imagine vehicles, right? Cars. Let's say there's one make and model of a car that is always crashing. It's always in the news for crashing. It's always on social media for crashing. There is all this video of this one make and model of a car crashing nonstop. And every single person who has crashed in this car said out of nowhere, the steering wheel just moved in their hands. And everybody that's crashing it is kind of saying the same thing. Whether it's true or not, I'm not going to take a chance with my life. I'm not going to buy that car. And that's how I am with the P320, is it's not happening with Springfields, it's not happening with Glocks, it's not happening with any of these other strike-of-fire pistols, M&Ps that are all issued, Walther PDPs. These are issued firearms in other agencies and departments that this stuff is not happening with. If every single one of these incidents were just negligence, then someone would negligently be firing Walther PDPs. Someone would be negligently firing, Glock 47s. Now, some people will point to Glock leg, which is a completely different issue. That is negligence. That was back when Glocks were being issued and departments, agencies, officers were transitioning from firearms that had a double action trigger pull to a striker fired pistol, and they were getting a little fingery in the trigger guard because they used to have all of that leeway. So when they were reholstering or they were holding a perfect gunpoint, a sympathetic squeeze on that striker fired trigger would lead to a negligent discharge. So when people were holstering or whatever, boom, they would Glock leg themselves. That was a training issue, not an actual mechanical issue. And seriously, I mean this. If you have not watched Pro Traban's video, then I'm not really interested in hearing your uninformed comments. I want you to at least see that half of the issue along with Sig's side of the issue with their Instagram and social media posts. But in both the vehicle scenario and the pistol scenario, there are lives at stake. There are so many other options on the market. Why take a chance? Now, the other P320 issue that it seems like Sig doesn't really want to talk about are the out-of-battery detonations. This has been happening a lot of the time with competition shooters, and it's a real thing. Robert Burke, aka the Sig Armorer, actually identified this situation and created a new disconnect that solves the issue. So now with the P320, we're up to the original drop safety stuff that they did not recall. We have the mysterious unintentional discharges that may or may not be the fault of the pistol. And we're having out-of-battery discharges that are blowing up people's guns. And again, you'll have some people on one half of the argument saying it was bad ammo that blew up the gun, and the other half of the argument is saying it was an out-of-battery discharge, the gun shouldn't have done that. And again, much like the previous issue, I think that it's both are happening. And the fact that Robert Burke, the Sig Armorer, who knows infinitely more about Sig pistols than I do, diagnosed the issue and created a part that will fix it, speaks volumes. And wow, there are so many controversies about the P320. I actually forgot one of these, and I'm inserting this after remembering it, and that is the ejector on the actual FCU of the P320. Sig was selling certain magazines that, when inserted, would overseat and hit the ejector and bend the ejector up. The problem is the ejector is not a replaceable part. It is literally a part of the FCU. You cannot take out the ejector and replace it with a new ejector. It's literally the fire control unit, literally the firearm. Now, what I was hearing from people who had this issue happen is they would reach out to Sig. Sig would fix it one time by hammering the ejector back into place, and then they said they would not fix it again. So that's kind of an inherent issue with the actual fire control unit design of the P320 that may or may not have been ripped off from Steyr, is that if for whatever reason the ejector becomes damaged, and then you hammer it down and it becomes damaged again, and for whatever reason it becomes brittle and breaks, the entire firearm is broken. The whole design just does not seem very well thought out. So that's the whole P320 situation and why I don't really recommend it, but I said that I don't really recommend Sig striker-fired pistols anymore, and that includes the P365. I do still recommend the P365 family of guns, just with an asterisk. Now again, talking about modern Sig as a company, the P365 released with issues: striker drag and broken firing pins. Now it was confirmed that Sig was using Indian MIMD parts in their P365s that could have been leading to the firing pin breakages, but Sig never recalled the P365 despite an insane amount of firing pins breaking on these guns. What they did do is they silently fixed the firing pin and striker system, I don't know, like 8+ times, maybe more, with silent revisions as they released. You can find the videos on YouTube of guys who were buying P365s at intervals and lining up all of the striker systems, the firing pins, and you can see the stealth changes they were making without recalling the problem guns. So again, Sig as a company, not really a huge fan of that, putting profit over people's safety. And yes, in my opinion, the firing pin breakages are a safety issue. This is a life-saving device. Imagine if your gun went click when your life or your family's life was on the line. Instead of recalling this to make sure their customers were all adequately protected, they made sure they were financially protected, and they silently fixed it without telling anybody. Now, the other issue about the P365 is the trigger return spring. That thing breaks at a random high-ish round count. I'm aware of it happening within 2,000 rounds, and I'm aware of it happening around 20,000 rounds. And it happens most frequently at those higher 10,000 round plus round counts. And it renders your pistol completely inoperable. So big yikes if that happens. I'm friendly with several people at local ranges that have rentals. One of them just flat out stopped renting the P365 family of guns because they were always going down and they were always having to send them into Sig. Now the other ranges still rent them out, but they have to swap them frequently. It is a known issue on the rental guns. Now, I still think the Sig P365 is the best in its size category. It has great capacity, great size, and it's very shootable with great features, including, a decent grip texture. This thing is very shootable, so I do recommend it, with the asterisk of how many rounds do you plan on putting through it? If someone says, this is going to be a carry gun, I'm going to put maybe a box of ammo through it a month or so, then yeah, I would say go with it. Just vet it for reliability first, make sure there are no issues with it out of the box. But if someone's like, this is going to be my training gun, I'm going to put tens of thousands of rounds through it and carry it, I'm going to tell them to either go with something else or to buy two and keep one for carry and one for training. Again, the striker fire pistol market in all size categories is so competitive and so oversaturated with all of these options, this abundance, this cornucopia of options on the market. Why take a chance? Now, I am not insinuating that other manufacturers have never had problems or that they haven't handled it in a sketchy or stealthy way. I mean, for example, the Glock 40 Smith & Wessons grenading when they were first coming out, totally an issue. And they deserved all the criticism in the world for that. It seemed like whenever Glock introduced a new generation of pistol, the first few out the door were having problems. Which leads me to the biggest lesson to be learned from this: do not buy any product that has the potential of causing serious bodily harm or worse right when it comes out. Let them iron out the issues for a year or preferably longer. But this is where my slack ends with Sig. Is here we are all of these years later, and we're still talking about it because things are still happening. I am beyond irritated as a consumer that we all have to be beta testers for these companies. They think they might have it figured out. They push it out there. We all pay a premium to then beta test and potentially have problems when we are the most loyal customers they'll ever have. It's awful. It's horrible. It's reality, not just in the gun world, in almost every industry. But with a company like Sig, when you're having all of these stories of out of battery discharges, of mystery accidental discharges, there are a plethora of court cases, NDAs, all of this shady stuff going on. All of these years later, my slack ends. If you have or decide to get a P320 or a P365, there is a very good chance that you are 100% good to go. But there's a slight chance that you're not. And that is a slight chance that I am not willing to take personally, which is why I don't personally own any more P320s. I mean no hate to anyone who enjoys their P320s or P365s. So take a moment to calm your central nervous system. I'm not personally attacking you or your choice in weapon that you have selected to defend yourself and your family. I'm just explaining why I make the personal choice to not pick up one of these guns and why I do not personally recommend them to people I care about. So what guns do I recommend in their place? Well, Glock, Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 series, the Walther PDP lineup, HK-VP9, CZ-P10, and Springfield Armory's striker-fired guns. So pick any one of those pistols and they will serve you very well. There are pros and cons to each one of those, but largely it's all personal preference. But at the very least, you will know without a doubt that the gun is not going to maybe, just maybe, mysteriously go off and cause severe bodily harm or worse to yourself or somebody else. So let me know what you think about this in the comments. I'm interested to actually hear from you guys. Are you still going to carry the P320 or the P365? And if not, what striker-fired pistol are you carrying in its place? If you enjoyed this video, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit that like, thumbs up button to help promote it. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the links in the description below are the place to be. I really appreciate all of your guys' support. The growth of the channel is all thanks to you, and I'm truly grateful. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video, everyone. It was great seeing you again, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm Brett, and this was Nightwood Guns. Nightwood out.